That's my father's, and just like that, the CEO's world stopped spinning. Before we dive in, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in stories that remind us the smallest act of grace can change everything, hit that like button, drop a comment, share this with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Now, let's begin. Rain hammered the windshield of a battered blue truck as Marcus Bell eased it off the highway shoulder, hazard lights blinking against the gray afternoon. Ahead of him, a woman stood beside a smoking silver sedan, one heel sinking into the mud, her tailored coat doing nothing against the downpour. She looked like she belonged in a boardroom, not stranded on a forgotten stretch of county road. Marcus almost drove past. He had exactly 40 minutes to pick up his 6-year-old daughter, Nia, from daycare before the late fee kicked in, and he didn't have money to spare on late fees or detours. But something in the woman's posture, the way her shoulders had folded inward like she was trying to disappear, made him pull over anyway. Her name was Vivian Cross, and until an hour ago, she had been untouchable. CEO of one of the largest logistics firms in the state, a woman who built her empire from nothing after her father's construction business collapsed when she was 22. She didn't take rides from strangers. She didn't need to. But her car had died in the middle of nowhere, her phone battery was at 2%, and the tow truck she'd called said 90 minutes, minimum. When Marcus rolled down his window and asked if she needed help, pride wrestled with desperation, and desperation won. She climbed into the passenger seat, apologizing for dripping on the upholstery, glancing around at the faded fabric seats and the crayon drawings taped to the dashboard. Marcus explained, almost apologetically himself, that he had to swing by his daughter's daycare first, that he hoped she didn't mind the short delay. Vivian said it was fine, though her mind was already elsewhere, already calculating how many meetings she'd miss, how this would look to the board. She wasn't really looking at him. Not yet. It was somewhere around the second mile, as the truck rounded a bend and morning light broke weakly through the clouds, that she noticed it. Hanging from the rearview mirror, swinging gently with the motion of the truck, was a small tarnished silver locket on a chain. Vivian's breath caught in her throat. She had seen that locket before, or one identical to it, engraved with a tiny compass rose on the front, a detail so specific it couldn't be coincidence. Her hand rose almost involuntarily, fingers trembling as she touched it, turned it over, and saw the faint initials scratched into the back, J.C. Her father's initials. James Cross. She asked Marcus, voice tight, where he'd gotten it. He glanced at her, surprised by the sudden shift in her tone, and explained plainly that it had belonged to a man named James, an old friend from years back, a mentor really, who'd passed away when Marcus was still finding his footing. James had given it to him during the hardest stretch of Marcus's life, told him to keep it as a reminder that storms don't last forever. Marcus had worn it, then hung it from his mirror, every single day since, like a small piece of armor against the world. Vivian sat frozen, rain still dripping from her hair onto her collar, staring at a piece of her father she thought had been lost forever. James Cross had died 12 years ago, and in the chaos of his failing business and the family's unraveling, most of his personal belongings had simply vanished, sold off or lost in the scramble to cover debts. Vivian had spent years quietly searching pawn shops and estate sales for anything, any fragment of him, and never found a single thing. Now here it was, swinging from the mirror of a stranger's truck, kept safe by a man who had no idea he was sitting beside James Cross's daughter. The story poured out slowly as the truck wound through back roads toward the daycare. Marcus explained that 15 years ago, when he was 19 and freshly out of a group home with nothing but a duffel bag and a chip on his shoulder, he'd wandered into a small construction site looking for day labor. The foreman, a broad-shouldered man with tired eyes and an unexpected gentleness, gave him a job nobody else would. That man was James. He taught Marcus everything, how to read blueprints, how to show up even on the days it hurt, how to believe he was worth investing in when the rest of the world had given up on him. When the business folded and James got sick shortly after, Marcus visited him every week at the hospital until the end, and on one of those final visits, James pressed the locket into his palm and told him to pass the kindness forward whenever he could. Vivian pressed a hand to her mouth, tears mixing with the rain still clinging to her face. She had spent so many years resenting her father's failure, blaming the collapse of the business for the family's hardest years, never once knowing that in his final chapter, he had quietly saved a 19-year-old stranger from the streets and given him a piece of himself to carry. The father she remembered as broken and defeated had, in his last months, been exactly the man she always believed he could be. They arrived at the daycare with minutes to spare, and Vivian watched through the rain-streaked window as a small girl with 2 crooked pigtails came barreling out the door and threw herself into Marcus's arms, shrieking his name like he'd hung the moon. In that moment, watching this single father who had nothing extra to give and gave anyway, Vivian understood something she'd missed in years of boardrooms and quarterly earnings calls. Her father's real legacy wasn't the business that failed. It was sitting in the front seat of a beat-up truck, wearing a purple jacket, raising a daughter alone, still choosing kindness even when life had given him every reason not to. She didn't tell Marcus who she was that day. She simply asked, quietly, if he'd let her thank him properly once her car was fixed. What followed over the next months was nothing either of them expected. Vivian created a foundation in her father's name, one that funded trade apprenticeships for young people aging out of foster care, the very kind of chance James had once given a scared 19-year-old on a construction site. She made Marcus its first advisor, not out of charity, but because nobody understood the mission better than he did. Nia got to keep her spot in daycare without the constant fear of falling behind on payments, and Marcus, for the first time in years, stopped carrying his worries entirely alone. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you that the smallest kindness can ripple further than we ever imagine, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs a little hope today. And before we go, I want to ask something special. In the comments below, tell us about one act of kindness, big or small, that changed your life or someone else's. Your story might be exactly what another viewer needs to read tonight. Marcus never went looking for a reward that rainy afternoon. He only stopped because someone needed help. And somewhere, in a locket swinging gently from a rearview mirror, James Cross's last lesson kept traveling forward, proving that the kindness we give away never really leaves us. It waits, quietly, to come home.